There is a moment every single day when your entire life is quietly being shaped, and most people completely miss it. It's not when problems show up. It's not when opportunities arrive. It's the moment you open your eyes and your mind begins speaking before you even realize it. Because before the world ever touches you, your thoughts already have. And here is the truth most people never stop to consider. What you allow to speak first in your mind will often decide what follows for the rest of your day. Not your circumstances, not your background, not even your situation, but the voice you agree with on the inside when everything is still quiet. So the real question is not what are you facing today? The real question is what are you feeding your mind before anything else gets a chance to speak? Faith is often misunderstood as something silent, passive, or hidden deep within the heart. While faith certainly begins internally, it was never designed to remain there. True faith eventually finds a voice. It speaks before circumstances change. It declares confidence before evidence appears. It agrees with truth even when visible results have not yet arrived. This is why one of the most important principles of faith is understanding that faith is released through words before miracles are seen. Many people wait for circumstances to improve before they speak positively. They wait for healing before they talk about restoration. They wait for breakthrough before they speak about victory. They wait for answers before they express confidence. But faith operates differently. Faith does not wait for visible proof before speaking. Faith speaks because it believes, not because it sees. This principle can be difficult for many people because human nature tends to rely on visible evidence. People often feel more comfortable speaking according to what they see, feel, or experience. If they feel weak, they speak weakness. If they feel discouraged, they speak defeat. If they face obstacles, they talk continually about the obstacles. While this may seem natural, it often strengthens fear rather than faith. Faith introduces a different approach. Faith acknowledges reality but refuses to allow reality to have the final word. Faith understands that present circumstances do not always represent the final outcome. Because of this, faith speaks with expectation even before visible change takes place. Imagine a farmer planting a seed into the ground. The day after planting, there is no visible harvest. The field may appear unchanged, yet the farmer does not walk through the field declaring that nothing is happening. He understands that growth is taking place beneath the surface. The unseen process is already working, even though the visible evidence has not yet appeared. Faith works in a similar way. When a person believes something good is possible, when they trust that healing, restoration, peace, or breakthrough can come, they begin speaking in agreement with that expectation. Their words stop reinforcing defeat and begin reinforcing possibility. This is important because words have a profound influence on the heart and mind. What a person consistently speaks eventually affects what they believe. If someone repeatedly says, "Nothing will ever change," those words strengthen hopelessness. If they continually say, "I will never overcome this," those words reinforce limitation. Over time, the mind begins accepting those declarations as truth, but faith-filled words create a different internal environment. When a person consistently declares, "I am moving forward," "I believe things can improve," or "I refuse to surrender to fear," those words begin strengthening confidence and hope. The heart starts aligning with possibility rather than defeat. Another reason words are so important is that they reveal what is truly happening internally. Under pressure, people often discover what they genuinely believe because their words expose it. Fear-filled hearts produce fearful speech. Confident hearts produce hopeful speech. This is why developing faith-filled language matters so much. It trains the heart to remain focused on truth even during difficult seasons. Faith-filled words are not about pretending problems do not exist. Genuine faith does not deny reality. It simply refuses to make reality the highest authority. A person can acknowledge challenges while still speaking with confidence and expectation. They can say, "Situation is difficult, but I believe improvement is possible." That statement recognizes reality while leaving room for faith. Another powerful truth is that speaking faith creates mental alignment. The human mind naturally moves in the direction of repeated thoughts and words. If someone spends all day speaking fear, their thoughts become increasingly fearful. But if they consistently speak hope and confidence, their thinking begins changing as well. Over time, repeated faith-filled speech renews the mind. It weakens negative patterns and strengthens positive expectations. The person begins noticing opportunities instead of only obstacles. They become more resilient during setbacks because their words have trained them to expect progress rather than permanent defeat. Faith-filled speech also influences emotional stability. Fearful words often create tension and anxiety. Negative confession increases emotional pressure because the mind continually focuses on problems. But hopeful words bring calmness. They remind the heart that current circumstances are temporary and that change remains possible. This is why faith speaks before miracles are seen. Faith does not wait until everything is perfect before expressing confidence. Faith understands that visible change often follows internal agreement. Long before breakthrough becomes visible, faith has already begun preparing the heart for it. Long before circumstances shift, faith has already chosen its language. And over time, that language shapes expectations, strengthens resilience, renews thinking, and creates an atmosphere where hope can thrive. Because faith is not merely believing silently within, it is courageously speaking in agreement with what you believe, even when the evidence has not yet caught up. And often the first sign that faith is truly alive is not what a person sees, but what they choose to say before the miracle appears. The 7 words, "I believe, I receive, it is mine," may appear simple on the surface, but they contain a powerful principle that has the ability to transform the way a person approaches faith, expectation, and daily life. These words represent more than a positive statement. They represent a mindset. They express confidence before results are visible. They demonstrate trust before circumstances change. And they train the heart to live from expectation instead of uncertainty. Many people spend their lives hoping something good will happen one day. They wish for improvement. They desire healing, peace, restoration, wisdom, or breakthrough. But often their language remains uncertain. They say things like, "Maybe things will get better," or "I hope something changes eventually." While hope is valuable, faith moves beyond simple wishing. Faith reaches a place where it confidently says, "I believe, I receive, it is mine." The first 2 words, "I believe," establish the foundation. Everything begins with belief. Before a person can experience confidence, perseverance, or expectation, they must first decide what they believe. Belief determines direction. It shapes perspective. It influences how a person interprets every situation they face. When someone constantly believes the worst, they prepare emotionally for disappointment. Their thoughts naturally move toward fear and limitation. But when they choose to believe that change is possible, that strength is available, and that God is still working, something shifts internally. Their mindset begins moving toward expectation instead of defeat. Belief is important because people generally move in the direction of what they truly believe. If they believe they are powerless, they often act powerless. If they believe improvement is impossible, they stop looking for opportunities. But if they believe growth is possible, they become more resilient. They continue moving forward even when progress feels slow. The next 2 words, "I receive," are equally powerful. Many people believe good things are possible in general, but they struggle to believe those things can happen for them personally. They believe others can succeed, others can experience peace, others can overcome difficulties. But when it comes to themselves, they feel unworthy, doubtful, or hesitant. Receiving requires acceptance. It is the decision to stop standing at a distance from possibility and start embracing it personally. It says, "I am not merely observing hope from afar. I am accepting it into my life." This shift is significant because many people remain stuck not because they lack opportunity, but because they never truly receive what is available to them emotionally or mentally. Receiving changes expectation. It turns faith from a distant idea into a personal reality. Instead of saying, "Maybe someday," the heart begins saying, "I am ready to embrace what God has prepared for me." That attitude creates openness, confidence, and anticipation. Then come the final 3 words, "It is mine." These words represent confidence and ownership. Not ownership based on pride or self-effort, but ownership based on trust. They reflect the decision to stop living in uncertainty and start living in expectation. Many people spend years speaking as though every good thing belongs to someone else. They constantly focus on what they lack. They emphasize what has not happened yet. Their language remains centered on absence. But it is mind shifts the focus. It declares that what has been promised is not merely available in theory, it is embraced in faith. This does not mean pretending circumstances have already changed. It means choosing confidence even before visible evidence appears. It means refusing to allow delay to create discouragement. It means maintaining expectation when results are still developing. Consider how often fear uses language to claim ownership. People say, my anxiety, my problem, my failure, or my limitation. Without realizing it, they repeatedly identify with the very things they want to overcome. But the statement, "it is mine," redirects ownership toward hope, peace, strength, and possibility instead. Another powerful aspect of these 7 words is their ability to renew thinking. Repeated declarations shape belief. What a person consistently says eventually influences how they think. If they continually speak doubt, doubt grows stronger. If they continually speak faith, confidence grows stronger. This is why repeating these words can become a powerful daily habit. I believe, I receive, it is mine. Each phrase reinforces a different part of the faith process. Belief establishes trust. Receiving creates acceptance. Ownership produces expectation. Together they form a complete cycle that strengthens the heart and mind. These words also help combat fear. Fear constantly asks questions like, what if nothing changes? What if I fail? What if things get worse? But faith answers differently. I believe, I receive, it is mine. Fear focuses on uncertainty. Faith focuses on confidence. Another important truth is that these 7 words encourage persistence. There will be seasons when progress feels slow. There will be moments when circumstances seem unchanged. During those times, many people become discouraged because they rely entirely on visible evidence. But these words remind the heart to remain steady. They encourage a person to keep believing when results are not immediate, to keep receiving when emotions fluctuate, to keep expecting when answers seem delayed. Over time, this consistency builds resilience and emotional stability. Ultimately, the power of I believe, I receive, it is mine lies not only in the words themselves, but in the mindset they create. They move a person from hesitation to confidence, from uncertainty to expectation, and from passive wishing to active faith. And when those 7 words become deeply rooted in the heart, they begin shaping thoughts, emotions, decisions, and expectations in ways that can transform an entire life. Speaking in agreement with God's promises activates expectation because words are never merely sounds that disappear into the air. Words shape thoughts, influence emotions, direct attention, and strengthen belief systems. What a person repeatedly speaks eventually becomes what they expect. Whether positive or negative, words create internal momentum. They condition the heart to anticipate certain outcomes. This is why speaking in agreement with God's promises is such a powerful principle. It trains the mind and spirit to expect what is possible rather than what is feared. Many people live with expectations they never consciously chose. Over years of negative experiences, disappointments, criticism, and setbacks, they gradually develop a mindset that expects struggle. They wake up expecting problems. They enter new opportunities expecting failure. They face challenges already convinced that things will not work out. These expectations are often reinforced by the words they speak every day. When a person continually says, "Nothing ever changes," "I always struggle," "Things never work out for me," "I'll probably fail anyway," those words begin shaping expectation. Over time, the heart starts believing them. The mind becomes conditioned to look for evidence that supports those negative declarations. Even when opportunities appear, they are often overlooked because expectation is already focused on limitation. But when a person begins speaking in agreement with God's promises, a different process begins. Instead of repeating fear, they repeat truth. Instead of reinforcing doubt, they reinforce faith. Instead of expecting defeat, they begin expecting help, guidance, strength, and breakthrough. This shift is powerful because expectation influences perception. People tend to notice what they expect. Someone who expects failure sees obstacles everywhere. Someone who expects growth notices opportunities others overlook. The circumstances may be similar, but expectation changes interpretation. Speaking God's promises daily gradually changes this lens. When a person consistently declares, "God is guiding my steps. I have strength for today. I will not be overcome. Peace is available to me. I am not alone in this season," their focus begins shifting away from fear and toward possibility. Their heart starts anticipating support rather than defeat. They become more aware of solutions, wisdom, and opportunities. Because expectation has changed. Another important truth is that expectation affects emotional stability. Fearful expectations create anxiety because the mind is constantly preparing for negative outcomes. A person expecting disaster lives under emotional pressure even when nothing bad has happened. Their thoughts are consumed by what-if scenarios, and their energy becomes drained by worry. But when expectation is rooted in God's promises, peace begins replacing anxiety. This does not mean challenges disappear. It means the person is no longer emotionally controlled by them. Their expectation becomes anchored in something stronger than circumstances. Instead of assuming the worst, they begin believing that help is available, that strength will come, and that difficult seasons are temporary. Speaking in agreement with God's promises also renews the mind. The human mind follows repeated patterns. Whatever is spoken consistently eventually influences thought patterns. Negative speech strengthens negative thinking. Faith-filled speech strengthens hopeful thinking. At first, this process may feel unnatural. If someone has spent years speaking defeat, positive confession can feel unfamiliar, but repetition creates change. The more truth is spoken, the more familiar it becomes. Over time, the mind begins accepting those declarations as normal rather than unusual. This is why consistency matters. One declaration spoken once may encourage temporarily, but repeated declarations spoken daily begin transforming belief systems. Every day a person chooses to agree with God's promises, they are reinforcing a new mental and emotional framework. They are training themselves to expect peace instead of panic, strength instead of weakness, and possibility instead of limitation. Another powerful aspect of expectation is perseverance. Many people give up too early because they lose expectation during seasons of delay. They assume that because results are not immediate, nothing is happening. But expectation rooted in God's promises understands that visible evidence is not the only sign of progress. A farmer does not dig up a seed every day to check if it is growing. He trusts the process. He understands that unseen growth often happens before visible results appear. Faith-filled expectation works the same way. It continues believing even when progress is not yet obvious. It continues speaking truth even when emotions fluctuate. It continues expecting good because confidence is rooted in promise rather than circumstance. Speaking in agreement with God's promises also changes identity. Many people define themselves by past failures, mistakes, or limitations. Their words reflect that identity. They say, "I'm not strong enough, I'll never change," or "I always mess things up." But God's promises reveal a different identity. When a person begins declaring truth about who they are, their self-perception starts changing. They stop identifying with fear and begin identifying with strength. They stop defining themselves by failure and begin seeing themselves through the lens of growth and possibility. Over time, this new identity produces confidence. Confidence strengthens expectation, and expectation influences daily behavior. Ultimately, speaking in agreement with God's promises activates expectation because it shifts focus from fear to faith, from limitation to possibility, and from uncertainty to confidence. It trains the heart to anticipate God's goodness instead of constantly preparing for disappointment. And when expectation becomes rooted in truth rather than fear, a person begins living differently. They think differently, speak differently, respond differently, and persevere differently. Not because circumstances have already changed, but because their expectation has. And often the first step toward experiencing a breakthrough is learning to expect one before it becomes visible. Doubt and faith cannot move in the same direction at the same time. One pulls the heart toward uncertainty, while the other pulls it toward confidence. Every person experiences moments where both voices compete for attention. There are seasons when circumstances seem unclear, answers appear delayed, and challenges feel larger than expected. During those moments, doubt often tries to take control of the mind. It whispers questions, creates uncertainty, and attempts to weaken expectation. But while doubt weakens confidence, consistent confession strengthens faith and gradually builds a foundation that remains stable even during difficult seasons. Doubt usually does not arrive suddenly. It often begins as a small question. A person may start wondering whether things will ever improve, whether their efforts matter, or whether their situation can truly change. If those questions are entertained repeatedly without being challenged, they begin influencing emotions and expectations. What started as a thought eventually becomes a mindset. Many people do not realize how much their words contribute to this process. When doubt enters the mind, it often seeks expression through speech. A person begins saying things like, "Maybe nothing will change," "I don't think I can do this," "It's probably too late," "I always seem to fail." These statements may appear harmless, but repeated often enough, they begin reinforcing doubt internally. Every negative declaration strengthens uncertainty and weakens confidence. Over time, the heart starts accepting those words as reality. This is why confession matters so much. Confession is not merely speaking words. It is the act of intentionally aligning speech with truth rather than fear. When a person chooses to speak faith consistently, they interrupt the cycle of doubt and begin creating a new pattern of thinking. For example, instead of saying, "I can't handle this," faith responds, "I have strength for this season." Instead of saying, "Nothing is changing," faith responds, "Progress is happening even if I cannot see it yet." Instead of saying, "I am overwhelmed," faith responds, "I will walk through this one step at a time." These statements may seem simple, but they have tremendous power because they influence the direction of thought. The mind naturally follows repeated language. What a person continually speaks eventually becomes what they expect. One of the reasons doubt is so dangerous is because it affects perception. Doubt causes people to focus primarily on obstacles. It magnifies problems while minimizing possibilities. A doubtful person may overlook opportunities because they are too focused on what could go wrong. Even when positive developments occur, doubt often dismisses them. Faith-filled confession changes that perspective. When a person consistently speaks truth, their attention begins shifting. They become more aware of opportunities, strengths, and signs of progress. Their outlook becomes more balanced because faith prevents problems from becoming the only thing they see. Another important truth is that doubt creates emotional instability. A doubtful mind constantly moves between hope and fear, confidence and uncertainty. One day a person feels optimistic, and the next day they feel discouraged. Their emotions rise and fall depending on circumstances because doubt prevents them from developing a stable foundation. Consistent confession strengthens stability. Every time a person speaks faith instead of fear, they reinforce confidence. Every time they declare truth instead of uncertainty, they strengthen emotional resilience. Over time, this repetition creates steadiness. The person becomes less controlled by temporary feelings because their faith has been reinforced daily. Consistency is the key. Many people speak faith only when they feel inspired. They confess truth during good days but return to negative speech during difficult days. As a result, they never fully develop strong confidence because their confession changes with their emotions. But genuine faith grows through consistency, not convenience. It continues speaking truth when circumstances improve. It continues speaking truth when circumstances remain unchanged. It continues speaking truth when emotions fluctuate. This consistency gradually weakens doubt's influence. Another reason confession strengthens faith is because it renews the mind. Negative thinking patterns are often deeply rooted. Years of fear, disappointment, or discouragement can create automatic reactions. A person may not even realize how negative their internal dialogue has become. Consistent confession interrupts those patterns. Every declaration of truth acts like a seed planted in the mind. At first, the changes may seem small. Old thoughts may still appear. Fear may still try to return. But repeated truth slowly replaces repeated doubt. New mental pathways form. The heart becomes stronger. Confidence begins growing. Confession also affects identity. People often become what they repeatedly say about themselves. Someone who constantly declares weakness eventually identifies with weakness. Someone who continually speaks failure begins expecting failure. But when a person consistently says, "I am growing stronger. I will overcome. I refuse to surrender to fear. I am capable of moving forward," their identity begins changing. They stop seeing themselves as victims of circumstances and begin seeing themselves as people capable of standing firm despite challenges. Another powerful truth is that faith-filled confession strengthens perseverance. Doubt encourages people to quit. It convinces them that effort is pointless and that change is impossible. But confession keeps hope alive. It reminds the heart that visible results are not the only measure of progress. Even during waiting seasons, faith continues speaking. Even during uncertainty, faith continues believing. Even when answers seem delayed, faith continues expecting. Ultimately, doubt weakens confidence because it focuses attention on limitation, uncertainty, and fear. But consistent confession strengthens faith because it redirects attention toward truth, possibility, and expectation. It renews the mind, stabilizes emotions, strengthens identity, and builds resilience. And over time, the voice of faith becomes stronger than the voice of doubt, not because challenges disappear, but because truth has been repeated so consistently that confidence becomes deeply rooted within the heart. The connection between the heart and the mouth is one of the most powerful principles in spiritual life, because what a person consistently speaks eventually reveals what they truly believe within. The heart and mouth do not operate independently. They work together in a continuous cycle. The heart produces thoughts and beliefs, and the mouth gives expression to those thoughts. At the same time, what the mouth repeatedly speaks also influences what the heart begins to believe. This interaction shapes identity, expectation, and overall life direction. Many people underestimate how deeply their words affect their inner world. They think words are only temporary expressions of emotion, but repeated speech becomes reinforcement. If a person constantly speaks fear, disappointment, or limitation, those words begin sinking deeper into their belief system. Over time, what they say outwardly becomes what they accept inwardly. The heart begins aligning with the mouth, and what was once only spoken becomes deeply believed. This is why alignment between the heart and mouth is essential for faith to grow. When the heart believes one thing but the mouth consistently speaks something else, internal conflict is created. That conflict weakens confidence and creates instability. But when both heart and mouth are aligned in truth, strength begins to develop. For example, if a person believes that change is possible but continues speaking defeat, their words slowly pull their heart away from hope. On the other hand, if a person begins speaking faith consistently even when emotions are weak, the repeated confession begins influencing the heart toward belief. Over time, alignment is formed, and what was once only spoken becomes deeply rooted conviction. This is why consistent confession is so important. It helps bring the heart into agreement with truth. At first, a person may speak faith while still feeling doubt. That is normal. The purpose of confession is not to deny feelings, but to gradually reshape internal belief. Every time truth is spoken, the heart is being guided in a new direction. Many people struggle because their hearts are filled with fear, but their mouths continue reinforcing that fear. They say things like, "I don't think anything will change. I always struggle. I'm not strong enough." These statements strengthen internal doubt. The heart hears what the mouth repeatedly says and begins accepting it as reality. This creates a cycle where fear in the heart produces fearful speech, and fearful speech further strengthens fear in the heart. Breaking this cycle requires intentional confession. When a person begins speaking truth consistently, even before they fully feel it, they are planting new patterns into their heart. At first, there may be resistance. Old thoughts may still dominate. Fear may still try to speak. But over time, repetition creates transformation. The heart begins adjusting to what the mouth repeatedly declares. This process is similar to training. Just as the body responds to repeated physical exercise, The heart responds to repeated verbal expression. What is spoken regularly becomes what is believed deeply. Another important truth is that alignment between heart and mouth produces stability. A divided internal life creates emotional instability. When a person says one thing but feels another, confusion grows. But when confession consistently aligns with truth, inner stability develops. The heart becomes less reactive to circumstances because it is being strengthened daily through consistent speech. This alignment also affects expectation. The heart naturally expects what it hears most often. If the mouth repeatedly speaks limitation, the heart begins expecting limitation. But if the mouth consistently speaks hope, strength, and possibility, expectation begins shifting in that direction. Expectation then influences perception. A person expecting failure will interpret situations negatively. A person expecting progress will notice opportunities more easily. This shows how deeply connected the heart and mouth truly are. Another powerful aspect of this connection is emotional regulation. Words have the ability to calm or intensify emotions. Fear-filled speech increases anxiety. Faith-filled speech brings reassurance. When a person intentionally speaks peace during stressful moments, they are not just expressing words, they are influencing emotional state. Over time, consistent faith-filled confession retrains emotional responses. The heart becomes less controlled by sudden fear because it has been repeatedly exposed to truth through speech. Identity is also shaped by heart-mouth alignment. What a person repeatedly says about themselves eventually becomes how they see themselves. Someone who constantly speaks weakness begins identifying with weakness, but someone who consistently speaks strength, growth, and faith begins identifying with those qualities. This transformation does not happen instantly. It develops gradually through repetition. Another important truth is that alignment strengthens perseverance. When the heart and mouth agree in truth, a person is more likely to continue during difficult seasons. Even when results are delayed, their confession keeps reinforcing hope. This prevents discouragement from taking over completely. Ultimately, the connection between heart and mouth is not just about words said, it is about internal transformation. The heart shapes the mouth and the mouth reshapes the heart. When both are aligned with truth, faith becomes stronger, expectation becomes clearer, emotions become steadier, and identity becomes more confident. And over time, this alignment creates a life where inner belief and spoken confession work together to produce stability, resilience, and a deeply rooted sense of faith-filled strength. Fear and faith both operate through repetition, but they produce completely different outcomes in a person's mind, emotions, and overall life experience. Fear grows stronger when it is repeated. The more a person rehearses fearful thoughts, imagines negative outcomes, or speaks discouraging words, the more deeply fear becomes rooted in their inner world. It begins as a small thought, but through repetition it becomes a dominant mindset that influences perception, behavior, and emotional stability. Faith operates in the same way, but in the opposite direction. Faith is also strengthened through repetition. When a person consistently focuses on truth, speaks hope-filled words, and reinforces positive expectation, faith gradually becomes stronger and more natural. This is why repetition is such a powerful force in shaping the inner life. It determines which influence becomes dominant over time. Many people do not realize that their daily thoughts and words are constantly reinforcing either fear or faith. There is rarely a neutral position. What is not intentionally strengthened by faith is often influenced by fear by default. If a person is not actively renewing their mind with truth, their thinking tends to drift toward worry, uncertainty, and negative expectation. This is why consistency is so important. Fear becomes powerful not because it is true, but because it is repeated. A person may hear a negative thought once, but if they continue repeating it internally or verbally, it begins to feel real. Thoughts like, "Something bad will happen," or "I will never get through this," may not be based on reality, but repetition gives them emotional weight. Eventually, those repeated thoughts begin shaping how a person interprets every situation. Faith also becomes powerful through repetition of truth. When a person repeatedly speaks or meditates on statements like, "I will not be overcome," "I have strength for this season," "Peace is available to me," "I am guided and supported," those truths begin sinking deeper into the heart. At first they may feel like simple words, but over time, repetition transforms them into belief. What was once only spoken becomes internal conviction. One of the most important effects of repetition is the formation of mental pathways. The human mind naturally builds patterns based on repeated input. If fear-based thinking is repeated often, the mind creates strong pathways of anxiety and expectation of failure. These pathways become automatic responses to stress. Even small challenges begin triggering fearful reactions because the mind has been trained in that direction. But when faith-filled thinking is repeated consistently, new pathways are formed. The mind begins responding differently to pressure. Instead of immediately reacting with fear, it begins considering truth. Instead of assuming the worst, it begins expecting possibility. This transformation does not happen instantly, but repetition gradually reshapes internal patterns. Another important truth is that repetition influences emotional conditioning. Emotions often follow thought patterns. If fear is repeatedly entertained, emotions become more sensitive to anxiety. A person becomes easily overwhelmed even by small challenges. But if faith is repeatedly reinforced, emotional stability increases. The heart becomes less reactive and more steady during difficulty. This is why daily confession, meditation, and focus are so powerful. They are not just spiritual practices, they are mental and emotional training systems. Each repeated declaration of truth strengthens internal stability and weakens fear's influence. Repetition also affects expectation. A person who repeatedly focuses on negative outcomes begins expecting negativity as the default outcome of life. This expectation influences perception. They begin noticing problems more than possibilities. But when faith is repeated, expectation shifts toward hope. The person begins anticipating guidance, strength, and positive change even in uncertain situations. Another powerful effect of repetition is identity formation. A person becomes what they repeatedly think and say about themselves. If someone constantly repeats limitations such as "I can't," "I always fail," or "I'm not enough," those words slowly shape identity. But if a person repeatedly declares strength, growth, and faith, identity begins to change in that direction. Over time, repetition determines what feels natural. Fear may feel natural to someone who has repeated fearful thinking for years, but faith becomes natural to someone who has consistently repeated truth. This shows that both fear and faith are learned responses shaped by repetition. Another important truth is that repetition builds emotional resilience. A person who consistently practices faith-filled thinking becomes less affected by temporary setbacks. They recover more quickly from discouragement because their internal system has been trained through repetition to return to truth instead of remaining in fear. Even during difficult seasons, repetition continues working. Fear does not disappear instantly, and neither does faith. But whichever one is consistently reinforced becomes dominant over time. This means every repeated thought, every repeated word, and every repeated focus is shaping the direction of the inner life. Ultimately, fear and faith both grow through repetition, but they lead to very different outcomes. Fear produces instability, anxiety, and limitation. Faith produces strength, peace, and expectation. The difference is not in intensity alone, but in what is repeated daily. And when faith becomes the repeated pattern of thought and speech, it gradually replaces fear's influence and builds a deeply rooted foundation of confidence, stability, and inner strength that becomes stronger with time. A life of faith is ultimately a life of expectation, and expectation determines how a person interprets every season they go through. Whether consciously or unconsciously, every individual lives with some level of expectation. It may be expectation of failure, difficulty, delay, or disappointment, or it may be expectation of help, guidance, strength, and breakthrough. Whatever a person consistently expects becomes the emotional lens through which they experience life. Expectation is powerful because it shapes perception before events even unfold. Two people can face the same situation, but their internal expectation determines how they interpret it. One may see only problems and feel overwhelmed, while the other may see opportunity, growth, or possibility. The external situation may be identical, but internal expectation creates completely different experiences. Many people struggle emotionally not because their circumstances are always negative, but because their expectation is shaped by fear. When a person expects the worst, even neutral situations feel threatening. Small delays feel like confirmation of failure. Temporary setbacks feel permanent. This is because expectation has already prepared the heart for disappointment before anything actually happens. Expectation also influences emotional response. A person who expects difficulty wakes up already emotionally tense. Their mind begins scanning for problems before the day even begins. They anticipate stress, conflict, or disappointment, and this anticipation creates anxiety. In contrast, a person who expects peace and guidance begins the day with a calmer internal atmosphere. Their expectation shapes their emotional starting point. This is why expectation is not a passive thought, it is an active force shaping daily experience. One of the most important truths about expectation is that it is closely tied to focus. What a person consistently focuses on becomes what they expect more of. If attention is constantly placed on problems, limitations, and negative outcomes, expectation naturally follows that direction. But when focus shifts toward truth, strength, and possibility, expectation begins changing as well. Over time, focus and expectation reinforce each other. What is focused on becomes expected, and what is expected becomes noticed more easily. This cycle can either strengthen fear or strengthen faith, depending on its direction. Expectation also plays a major role in perseverance. Life includes waiting seasons where progress is not immediately visible. During those times, expectation determines whether a person continues or gives up. A person with low expectation interprets delay as failure and often loses motivation quickly. But a person with strong expectation of good interprets delay differently. They understand that unseen progress may still be happening and that timing does not always reflect absence of movement. This mindset creates endurance. Many people lose hope not because nothing is happening, but because their expectation weakens during waiting. They begin to assume silence means absence and delay means denial. But expectation rooted in truth understands that visible evidence is not always immediate. Expectation also shapes speech. People naturally speak in alignment with what they expect internally. A person expecting failure often speaks negatively about themselves, their future, and their circumstances. But a person expecting growth begins speaking hope, strength, and possibility. These spoken expectations reinforce internal belief systems and gradually influence behavior. This is why words and expectation are deeply connected. What is spoken repeatedly becomes what is expected more strongly over time. And what is expected begins shaping emotional response to life. Another powerful truth is that expectation influences perception. When a person expects negativity, they tend to notice problems more easily. Their mind filters experiences through fear. Even positive situations may be overlooked or minimized. But when expectation is shaped by faith, the mind begins noticing opportunities, solutions, and moments of favor that were previously ignored. Expectation also affects emotional resilience. People with low expectation become easily discouraged because every setback feels like confirmation of failure. But people with strong expectation of good recovery more quickly emotionally. They are not as easily shaken by temporary difficulty because their internal belief system is anchored in something stronger than circumstances. Another important aspect of expectation is identity. A person who consistently expects failure begins identifying with limitation, but a person who consistently expects growth, strength, and progress begins identifying with possibility. This identity then influences behavior, decisions, and long-term direction. Expectation also prepares the heart for outcomes. A person living in constant expectation of failure is often emotionally unprepared when something positive happens. But a person who lives with faith-filled expectation becomes more open, more ready, and more receptive to positive change when it arrives. Ultimately, expectation determines how life is experienced internally. It does not always change external circumstances immediately, but it deeply influences interpretation, emotional stability, and mindset. Life feels different depending on whether expectation is rooted in fear or in faith. And when expectation is consistently aligned with truth rather than fear, a person begins to walk with quiet confidence even in uncertain seasons. They may not see every answer yet, but they carry an inner assurance that their future is not defined by present limitations, and that what they are expecting in faith is still possible, even when it has not yet become visible.